going to Munich, and I can speak to the Director General of the Royal United Services Institute and the former US Defence Secretary, representative for Europe in NATO, Rachel Ellehuus, live from Munich. Good morning, Rachel. Glad you were able to join us.
Absolutely.
There's going to be this meeting of European heads of government called, we gather, by President Macron tomorrow. What do you expect to come out of that gathering?
I think it's a wonderful idea that Macron is convening European countries, because so far we haven't heard a coherent plan from the U.S. administration. And this is an opportunity for Europeans to get together and define what they want and the terms that they want to convey to the Russians, the Ukrainians, to the U.S. before we go into these peace negotiations. They deserve a seat at the table.
Well, let's come back to Europe in a second, but you say that there wasn't anything coherent emerging from the White House, essentially. What did you make of Mr. Vance's speech last week, which appeared to be an attempt to lay out some important position from the White House, which I suppose in its essence was Europe, the thing we're most worried about is that you're undermining the values for which we're supposed to be standing, and that's the thing that most bothers Mr. Trump and Mr. Vance.
Well, needless to say, the speech didn't land well. There was a mood of shock in the room, primarily because this is a security and defense conference. And so, frankly, it was a missed opportunity from the U.S. administration to lay out their view and their expectations for Europeans on Ukraine.
But do you think that he didn't quite say it this way, but is this a signal that what we're going to see is an administration that is less interested in Europe, and they're basically just trying to clear the deck so they can focus on Indo-Pacific, the threat of China? That's
something that's been a consistent theme in U.S. foreign and security policy for at least the last decade that I've been in and out of government. We've been asking Europe to step up and spend more. Our national security strategy in the U.S. talks about China as the pacing challenge. So it's about time that we have this conversation around the levels of defense spending and investment in Europe. And there was broad agreement around the table that 2% isn't enough. And as we march to the NATO summit in The Hague, that those expectations and those investments really need to ramp up.
Well, as you say, I mean, people have been saying this for ages, and I don't think it's any prejudice against Mr. Trump to say that the foreign policy establishment on both sides of the Atlantic basically don't think much of him. But I suppose it could be said that whatever his tactics, he's actually forced the Europeans to act when under Obama, under Biden, they basically said, yeah, we'll let you know, and didn't stump up.
Well, more than Mr. Trump's words or any urging from any U.S. administration, I think Europeans just need to look at the security environment around them and the challenges right on the border with Ukraine. I'd be particularly worried about potential meddling in Belarus, Moldova, potentially Western Balkans. So, yes, there's pressure from the U.S. to step up, but I think there should be a sense of urgency among Europeans, just given the security environment.
Can you do anything to help us quantify what stepping up might mean? We in the UK are spending 2.3% of GDP. To make that up to 3%, it might mean another 20 billion. Mr. Trump has talked about 5%. What sort of scale of increase do you think this might mean in spending for us, for the Germans, for the French?
Well, I hesitate to put a number on it. There is no output without input, so a minimum of 2% and counting is certainly needed. But it also matters how you spend it. And a good portion of the UK defense budget goes towards the nuclear deterrent. So specifically for the UK, I think you have to find the headroom to invest in conventional capabilities as well as innovation, to continue to invest in people, recruitment, personnel. I did appreciate that your Secretary of State for Defense, John Healey, stepped up to lead at the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. That's an important signal that the UK and continental Europe are willing and able to step up and lead on Ukraine.
We've got a defence review coming. We don't quite know when it'll report, but sometime in the first half of this year, I would guess. We talked on this programme before about the shrinking of the armed forces, numbers down to 72, 73,000. But actually, I'm very interested in the concept that's being talked about a lot these days, which is lethality, i.e., you don't need more people. What you need are better guns, more drones, more complicated weapons that will interfere with other systems and so on. Is that where the money has to go?
Well, lethality is certainly important, but people are also important. So technology won't solve all our problems. So while I hear that argument, and that argument resonates with me in terms of focusing on lethality and not over-focusing on mass, it's a combination of things. The term being used here was precise mass, and the Ukrainians have shown us how that's done. How you take a low-cost drone and you use that instead of an F-16 with heavy weapons to create long-range strike options. So those are the types of creative lessons that we can draw from Ukraine and that we can work with industry to deliver.
I want to go back to ask you about the White House's new method of diplomacy, if I can put it that way. But just on Ukraine specifically, what's your bet? How likely is, I won't use the word ceasefire, let's say cessation of hostilities, and if so, when?
That's a difficult question. I think the first problem is that we don't have the right people at the table. Both Europe and the Ukrainians have agency in this. They have stake in this. Even if there were the contours of some sort of ceasefire or peace plan, it's going to be Europe and Ukraine that have to be the ones on the front line of implementing this. So I think we're a long way off. I really haven't heard the details of a plan, much less any sort of thought towards the forces and the security guarantees that would need to underpin that to make it credible for even a short period of time. So I think we're looking at months, if not longer.
Can I ask you about the Trump method, as it were? People are saying, oh, he's given away all his cards before the negotiation starts. I suppose there's another way of looking at it, which is that there's a sort of Kissinger-esque realpolitik here in which he says, I know exactly what the situation is, and I'm basically just saying, this is what reality looks like. Here's a deal, take it or leave it. Is there bluff going on here, or is there method in the madness, or is it just, day-to-day tactical?
Well, it's hard to decipher sometimes, but I do think there is a bit of method into the madness in that we're dealing with tough problems, whether it's Ukraine, increasing European defense spending, or finding a way to peace in the Middle East. So what the Trump administration is doing is throwing some ideas out there. We might not think they're conventional, but it's an idea. And frankly, if allies don't like it, the burden is on them to try to find some alternatives and to put those on the table. And I think that would be very welcome. And the administration would be open to that kind of leadership from Europe.
Rachel Ellehuus, speaking from what looks like a rather cold but rather beautiful Munich, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.